I would like to welcome you to our latest webinar on changing face of appraisals. This webinar will provide you with the opportunity to reflect on the key areas being faced in schools and colleges regarding supporting staff and teaching, and provide you with some tips and solutions. Presenting today's webinar is myself, Andy Goodeve, and Becky Howitt. We both have a background in education from a teaching and a learning perspective. A lot has happened in appraisals since the introduction of performance management as part of the Education Act in 2002. Firstly, they were used as a tool to hold teachers to account. This evolved with performance-related pay driven by measurable numerical percentage objectives and a high-stakes culture. Students seem to become more data, a percentage point, rather than having a personality. Those in education understand student performance is based on many variables, many not measurable, and many out of the teacher's control. For example, a person's health or their home environment. This performance measure has led to an undermining of teacher morale and motivation. Time to rethink appraisals. Many educational organisations have been rethinking and transforming appraisals from an accountable to a more developmental process. This shift in culture requires staff to have a clear understanding of what good quality looks like, setting high expectations, and appraisal having greater emphasis on coaching and professional dialogue. This shift encourages professional responsibility, accountability, and a willingness to contribute to the whole school. Rethinking will mean colleagues will feel more empowered to engage and be inspired in the appraisal process. A focus on reflection, the strengths, the areas for improvement, and aspirations, where everyone is striving to improve. How to change appraisals. Professional discussions or check-ins become more regular and ongoing. There's no longer a tick box exercise of target setting, mid-year review, and the end of year evaluation. These discussions focus on how and why classroom learning is progressing, identifying potential barriers of learning, as well as what has happened to teachers themselves. Line managers, mentors, and appraisers empower staff by creating a climate of trust and support. They listen, probe, ask pertinent questions, and allow time to reflect. They provide meaningful support and next steps of improvement. Formal lesson observations are mostly replaced by frequent, short lesson drop-ins. These create a more accurate picture and give typicality of performance over time. Drop-ins are conducted not just by leadership, but also by their peers. This all adds to getting a clear understanding of teaching and learning, an understanding of where we are now and what we need to do to improve. Professional development is at the core of improvement. CPD is relevant to their needs. They're given time to reflect and evaluate, and also importantly, how to disseminate to others. Appraisal conversations focus on improving and developing, encouraging the individual to actively participate in establishing an understanding of their strengths and development. I will now pass you on to Becky to explain how School IP functionality can help you develop your chosen appraisal process.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for that. So how can School IP help with these processes? Well, we'll look at the end game first. And the big question here is, what do we want to achieve? Well, the aim is for colleagues to feel empowered. We want them to engage and we want them to be inspired in the appraisal process. So how do we actually do this using the School IP tools? Well, they can do this by several different ways. One of them is that you can tinker around with the settings in School IP to allow staff to actually set their own performance management objectives and actions. The second way is to encourage a whole raft of self-reflection throughout the school. And School IP supports this superbly by the use of blogs, video analysis, forms and lesson drop-ins, areas for development, CPD requests, and regular check-ins. So I'm going to hop out of this presentation and go into school IP. Now I'm logged in as a teacher, Jessica Alcott, and this is her portfolio. And we're just going to have a look first at how Jessica could set her own performance management objective and actions. So the scenario is that this appraisal has just been opened by the school IP administrator, and as yet there are no objectives that have been set. So in this school, the staff have been asked before they have their one-to-one with their line manager to spend some time thinking about the objectives that they would like to achieve this year. And there's also been guidance as to how it can be linked to the school development plan, priorities and objectives. So we're really tying things here together. But what we're doing, we're moving teachers from being accountable to the SLT to being more developmental and more accountable for their own appraisal. So how do we do it? We go into objectives, we'll go to what next and add an objective. So because we've got the school development plan in this school, we can now link it to the priorities or the objectives in this school development plan if we wish to. So for this one, I'm going to link it to a priority. And here we are, we've got 6 priorities. I'm going to link it to that one, the standards of achievement, raise standards throughout the school. And I'm thinking that as a teacher, I can contribute to this, and I can do that by setting an objective to raise the attainment by assessment, okay, in X subject. We're going to make it smart by a certain percent by a certain date. So we're keeping it smart, we're keeping it measurable, we're keeping it time bound. Now I could put my performance criteria in here, okay, but I know that I can always review this with my line manager because I am going to have a one-to-one to actually get this signed off in this school. Remains in progress. The due date always by default falls in line with the end of this appraisal period. I'm going to leave that as is. I can have a go at thinking about the kinds of evidence that I would be uploading against this objective to ensure that I can prove that I'm meeting it. Okay, so it might be some form of assessment data on whatever, and then something else, and then something else. Now, in this school as well, we've also given staff the ability to add their own actions, which means each objective can be broken down into smaller stepped actions. So I can click to add my own action. Action 1 to break this down is blah, 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 and I'm going to achieve that by, say, November of that academic year. And I'll add that in. Okay, so here I've got my objective. If I click on the plus, you can see my action, and at any time, myself or my line manager can come along and we can carry on and breaking that down into actions. And then when I have my one-to-one with my line manager, either myself or my line manager can be logged in and we can edit that. Okay, now what you would probably do in a school is give this process a time frame to do that in, and then I would suggest you'd go back to the settings and take off the ability for every member of staff then to be able to keep editing or even delete it. And so then at that point, when you take off the settings for the everyday member of staff doing that, only their line managers will then still be able to edit or delete it. It just sort of fixes that in place, really. So that's one way. Setting the objectives, allowing every staff member to set their objectives before the one-to-one is a great way of giving them more accountability. So how else do we give teachers more professional accountability? Well, one is through self-reflection. So the first thing I want to have a look at here is using the activity feed to create a regular blog or a reflective journal, you might want to call it. Now here you can see that I've already put some reflective blogs and journals in my activity feed. I've kept the title the same: reflective log week 15, week 16, week 17, etc. So I'm easily able to identify it. So when I come to week 18, I'd go to what next, add blog, put in the same title, reflective blog week 18. In my list, I've added the fact that this is a reflective blog. Okay, right in my reflective blog. And then I'm not actually going to share it with anybody. I'm just thinking that this is a journal, this is a blog for myself. By default, always remember that your line manager can see it as well if they need to. So because I just want it to be sort of a bit of a closed circuit, I'm going to take off the ability for all of the rest of my collaborators to see it. I'm going to add that in. Okay, so here we've got my blogs. So in reality, you wouldn't have each reflective blog following on from each other. You'd have other bits of information, conversations, examples of best practice that other people have shared with you. So I've got one from Daniel here. We've got a conversation going here, one from Gary, one from Marie, one from another one from Daniel. It's going to be interspersed. So the idea is that I can just now focus on my reflective blogs by selecting the appropriate titles here for the filter. And I can have a look at my most recent reflective blogs and it will bring them all together for me. Okay, so that's one way of being self-reflective. Another way of being self-reflective is by video analysis. So the scenario is that Jessica, she's identified herself that she would like to really focus in on some aspect of teaching and learning that goes on in her classroom. It's just like offering an extra pair of eyes and ears when you're teaching and when you're helping children and when you're working in the classroom. It's so easy not to be able to see everything. So she's downloaded the app, the School IP app, which records video in a really easy manner, uploads it immediately to your evidence folder, identifies that that's a video. So then later, when Jessica's ready, she can watch herself teaching and learning. Now, she might think that actually it's the plenary that I'm focusing on, because for this activity, you want to narrow your focus. Okay, so I can move that timeline to my plenary, watch the relevant bit of the video, pause it, and now I'm actually going to make a reflective comment about that. Okay. Now, in addition to my reflective comment, I could put a web link, I could upload a picture, or indeed another video if I wanted to, and I would add that in. Okay, now the beauty of that is that it timestamps that comment to that part of the video. So at any time, I can go back to that part of the video and it will play it from that point onwards. Okay, now that's great for me for self-reflection. But what it's also great for is I can share that evidence, that piece of evidence. So let's say my line manager or my coach can be a part of that. They can review it, they can guide me, they can help me. And then what they could do, I could guide them to one or two or all of these annotations and say, can you just watch one for me? They would click on that. it would play that relevant part of the video. Okay, and at that point, they can then add their annotation in a supportive fashion, perhaps giving you pointers and ideas of things that you could try and where you could go. Okay, so really, video annotation is a fantastic self-reflection tool. It's really giving the teacher a lot more power in their hands to work towards perhaps tweak changing some of their practice. I'm going to go to what next? I'm going to go back to portfolio now. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is monitoring. Now, monitoring can include lesson drop-ins. So Andy mentioned that a great way for self-reflection is not only having lesson drop-ins that are conducted by the leadership, but lesson drop-ins that peers conduct on you and you conduct on peers as well. But you could also then collaborate with others and discuss those lesson drop-ins. So, for example, here we've got a lesson drop-in here, that's been done by Tim Smith, and I could then equally do a lesson drop-in on Tim Smith, and we could then discuss that. Alternatively, you could set up monitoring for self-review. So here we've got a self-review form for self-reflection for Jessica to conduct on herself. And again, the settings have all been changed. So Jessica will receive this form, and indeed you might have it that throughout the year you want to set up a process of self-reflection. So a leader can push out forms to members of staff or groups of staff, certain members of staff, to then be completed throughout the year. And then that gives the line managers and the SLT fantastic data that they can analyse, ready for support. Final comments here, picking out any areas for development, which I'm going to pick one there. Okay, I'm going to put area for development from form, just to identify it. You'd obviously put what the area is and what kind of actions you would take. Do you need any support? And we would add that in. And finally, final comments, etc. So once that form's filled in, and if you've got any forms, if you want to explore that, please get in touch. We'll support you on that. We'll submit that. And so that self-reflection form there is submitted. So equally, there are many different forms. We've got a self-reflective one here, and that's a work scrutiny. So before any SLT, any leadership team come, you could do a self-reflective work scrutiny there against the criteria that's outlined on this form. Gives you a fighting chance before somebody else comes and observes. Gives you a fighting chance to see what the criteria is for any kind of monitoring activity. Okay, so that's monitoring, and we've really found when we've spoken to schools, it's a fantastic self-reflection activity to do. So I'm going to go to area for development. We touched upon it in that form, and I'll show you why I put that in. Here we go, area for development. I think that's from monitoring, from form. I think that's what I said. Yeah, area for development from form. Okay, so that's been created from the form, and it's been picked up by yourself when you were doing a self-reflection on the form, or it could have been picked up by anybody else. Like this one, I can see that that's a form, and that was picked up by the person who observed Jessica on this occasion, and the same with that one. But as you can see, areas for development can be created at any time by the teacher, by the line manager. It doesn't have to be on a monitoring form. It can just be as an area for development. And it can be short term, like this one, become more au fait with teaching football skills. this one, another example of a short-term one, be more accurate with timekeeping, start and finish lessons on time, or it could be more long-term. So it could be something like, I want to be able to start an ed in 2 years. I want to be ambitious. I want to get my master's, and my actions would be discuss with line manager and CPD lead, research unis, courses. Okay, and I'm sure I'll need some support there to enable that to happen. But what it's done, it's recorded it now. It's recorded it so my line manager is aware. It's recorded it so the SLT are aware. And they will be able to pick that up in reports of areas for development coming from across the whole school. And it doesn't mean that I have to complete it this year, because I can carry those areas for development over to next year, the year after. But I've recorded this. I want to make my personal and professional development accountable. Okay, so areas for development. So the next thing, and this might crop up from an area for development, I could make a CPD request. Okay, I'm not just waiting for CPD to happen to me. I'm not just waiting for the regular inset dates and the training for my department. I'm going to make a request. So we've set this system up where every user can go to What Next and CPD request. And the title is, let's say I found that course. And I could copy and paste the description in there from the website or type in my own. CPD type is external. Okay. And the status is planned. So I haven't attended it. It's not that it's planned and I've not had a chance to attend it. The cost is, what would the cost of an MA be? Let's just say I don't know for now. And the course link, I'd obviously put that there. As much information as possible is always a good one. The provider, it might be somebody that we've used before or not, in which case I could create one. So let's say Derby Uni. Okay, and it starts after Easter. Okay, cover, no, and where is it linked to? So if you're doing a CPD request, this is where you fight your corner of why this would be a really useful course for you to go on. Is it linked, for example, to any of your objectives? Well, let's say it is. Is it linked, for example, to any of your monitoring activity? It probably wouldn't be in this case. Any standards, probably every single one. But you kind of get the picture, how it can be linked. How will it help you meet your personal targets? Put in as much detail in there. How will it help support the overall department and faculty targets? And then when that's finished, or when it's partway through, whichever relevant time, you would put in the impact and feedback and the rating, and you would add that in. So now what happens now is that goes to your line manager to approve or not. And then in this school, it then goes to the cover supervisor, who in this case, we don't need cover. So they approve it or not. And then it goes to the CPD leader, who approves it or not, and then sets the wheels in motion to book that course in. So that CPD request, I'm taking charge of that as a teacher. So the final thing I wanted to talk about is interim reviews. Now, traditionally, interim reviews, of course, take place with your line manager partway throughout the year. We're also using this for 10-minute check-ins, so not just the spring review partway throughout the year. We're having 10-minute check-ins to regularly have conversations and just record that part of the conversation. So it might not be on all of these things. A 10-minute check-in might just be on monitoring, for example, or areas for development. Okay, so I would my line manager would start that off. I can't do that, of course, but what I can do, I can show you an example of one that has been started. So details here, the line manager would pop the details there. What are we looking at during this 10-minute check-in? They've also got an area for extra notes. The line manager might choose to write some comments about the objective, if that's the focus, or the monitoring, if that's the focus, etc., etc., etc. But the point is, I wanted to show you that any interim review, any 10-minute check-in is your chance as a staff member to take accountability for your progress. And this is where you record it. You record it in the appraisee comments. Now that cannot be edited. It can't be deleted. It's set in stone and it's captured throughout the year. So again, it's using all of the tools and everything at your fingertips to enable you to fully take charge of your professional learning. So I'm going to come to an end there. As you can see, lots of different ways, lots and lots of different ways of doing that. I can see that some people have been putting their hand up and Andy's been answering questions as we've been going through on the messaging system. So thank you for that. If anybody has any other questions at all. Okay, thank you for that. So if you do have any further questions, if anything occurs to you after this webinar, or perhaps if you watch it online later, please do get in touch. Please don't forget that we offer free and unlimited online training for all of our customers. So if you wanted to go through any of these areas, if you want to set up any of these, if you want to investigate the settings further, then please book in. Here are the further webinars that we do. You can see this webinar on our Deventio Education website and on the webinars page. And here are our contact details. There's the website, there's Andy, there's myself and telephone number. Contact us through any of those means and we will be happy to help. So is there anything that you would like to add, Andy, before we close?
No, thank you very much, Becky. I think that gives a comprehensive account of how we can use it to actually engage staff in the appraisal process. So thank you very much.
Super duper. Thank you. Bye bye, everybody.